on the side.
And they're building in Redmond.
Yeah.
It's and oh, no, I kind of remember. We've been doing work over in Redmond. Yeah, that's weird. Did you get fired? Still there?
You mean the public works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on leave. I think they'll be gone pretty quick.
It doesn't smell right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 6 o'clock, and today is Monday, February 24th. We're going to call the City Council City Manager Work Session meeting to order. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, so as all of you, I hope, are aware, we've been working on through the so I'll turn the time over to Mr. Spencer and he can go from there.
Yeah, good evening, and thanks for showing up tonight. We just really wanted to spend some time bringing the city council up to speed with the progress that we've been on with our urban growth boundary amendment process. You remember in our goal setting from 2024 as well as 2025 that creating additional employment lands for industrial expansion is council's top priority for economic development and sustainability. And we spent the majority of 2024 working with a firm called Johnson Economics, and we were preparing an economic opportunities analysis, which goes into the city's forecasted employment needs over through that economic opportunities analysis, we're able to identify certain industries which may have special needs in addition to, your Fred Meyer or your AutoZone that can go in a commercial property. There may be things, specifically hyperscale data centers, which have absorbed about 300 acres of land in the last year. And how do we continue to accommodate that need in the future as we're looking forward to continued demand in that sector? And so what the economic opportunities analysis showed was that that is a growing sector. There is continued pressure to build more data centers in the region, in the state, and nationally. And about 1,200 acres of buildable industrial land that will be able to accommodate these economic needs over the next 20 years. And so with that study in place showing the deficiency, we then started working with Winterbrook Planning, and I have Jesse Winterode beside me here now to kind of go over the findings and basically the deficiencies that we've already identified, where the city could expand in the future to accommodate those needs, and what the next steps would be. Later in the council meeting, not during the work session, you can't take action during our work sessions, but during the regular session, we have a resolution which follows up on some of the presentation tonight, which would either direct staff or not. But hopefully this work session here will give you a much more in-depth look at what's going on so you can make a more informed decision tonight.
All right. Thank you. Right. Yes, I'm Jesse Winterode with Winterbrook Planning. We've been working on this for a little bit and building from the work that Johnson Economics did, as Clint said. And we have a little presentation, and I'm here to also answer questions, and I want to answer your questions. So very excited to be here, and thank you for having me. Is this and the moment of truth?
Aha.
It worked. All right. So the EOA, which you got to as Clint said, a significant lack of industrial and commercial land to meet the overall needs, but more specifically, an unmet need for 9 hyperscale data center sites in Hermiston. Right now, that EOA showed that they need 11, that there is a need here for 11 hyperscale sites, but you have 2 building right now. So The deficiency is 9. And so we said, well, how do we go about going through Oregon's somewhat strenuous and strict land use system to achieve these 9 hyperscale data centers?
Before,
Yeah.
before we I just want to make sure everybody understands what this map is showing. What we see things highlighted in purple and red. The purple is currently vacant industrial sites, and the red is currently vacant commercial sites. When you're looking at something like a hyperscale data center, they have a minimum parcel size in order to be economically viable. And generally that is 100 acres. We don't currently have any sites on this map that you're looking at that exceed 100 acres. In fact, the largest one on there is about 40. So right now we have no ability to accommodate that. And that's what this is showing, is where our vacant industrial and commercial land is.
All right. But none of them suitable to meet new hyperscale data centers. So this is a big picture look at Hermiston and the surrounding areas. You have, as I believe you know, several major constraints around Hermiston, the river and the railroads being pretty significant. So what we do to meet state law is we look at the priorities for expansion. This is one of the biggest things that we'll deal with here in this presentation today. And there are a lot of factors to consider, but priorities are by far the most important piece as we go through the process. And we show some of the zoning, and the zoning controls priorities. The first priority is urban reserve, which Hermiston doesn't have any, and exception lands. And exception lands are basically anything other than farmland. And so on this map, you see farmland in green and exception land in colors other than river and floodplain. And so on the south side, you have a number of industrial exception areas. They were identified by the county as good for industrial, they're existing industrial. And that area on the south is also identified by the county's comp plan as an area for EFU FI. The official comprehensive plan zoning for this is farmland on the south side, but you can see the thought process that went on down there. On the west and north, you see other exception areas, mostly smaller lot residential parcels in the yellow. And while those are highest priority, they don't tend to meet the need for 100-acre sites. And so we're pretty limited when we look at our first priority of exception areas on where we can actually go to meet the identified site needs, which are shown here. And so these were identified. In any case, as Clint said, they're 100-acre contiguous acres after you take away things that are not suitable, like streams or floodplain or sloped areas. And we want them to be at least 20-acre component tax lots. So if you have a property that is, you have an 80-acre and same person owns 40 acres next door, that's 120 acres that could meet the criteria. But if it's, bunch of little tiny lots, then it doesn't really work for consolidating. And so we, and also for the ease of analysis, set it at 20 acres to look at consolidated sites that can be. We can't be divided by a railroad track or a highway. It has to be, a contiguous site of land they can build on. We have outside of 5%, and this is something that is normal for data centers and large industry. 5% grade is something that they don't want to deal with anything above that, because if you get more slope on these massive building sites, you are moving a lot of dirt. A massive, massive amount of dirt to deal with that. And so part of the site needs identified in the UA, and we're applying here, is 5% slope grade. And one of the things that we're working on, sure these things can be served by city facilities, city utilities, and do we have enough supply, and can it get there? Because it doesn't make any sense to have a site for a use that can't be served with sufficient sewer, water, electricity for that use. And so that's one of the things we look at, and that's generally going to be areas that are adjacent to existing UGB to extend services. And so we found, applying those site needs, a number of sites that are mostly on the south and west side of Hermiston's UGB. Because as you call on the other zoning, on the north side, it sort of reads, the map reads as one would expect, to large sites on mostly the south side. And these are the basic sites that we have to work with. Then we apply our priorities for the type of land. And what we have here is a blurry slide, but the first priority is exception area. And S2 on this slide is the only piece of large vacant suitable land that's currently designated as an industrial exception area. And so that's the highest priority. And that is land county, which brings us to the third priority, which is soils that aren't predominantly value soils. And so we have a situation with the SW property that it is not predominantly high value soils. And this is not something we see all too often. So it's interesting, but it's 52% soils that put it into the third priority, which is a higher priority than the typical farmland you see. For the low, fourth priority is high value soils, and they have basically two tiers. And the first tier for higher priority is low quality. And you have less productive and more productive high value soils. And that's identified by soil class. So on the blue properties, the soil class is soil class 4 predominantly, which the higher you go with soil class, the worse soil it is. So class 1 is the best. Class 4 is basically the worst general farmland that you'll find. And these are predominantly class 4, the blues W, S1, S3. And the light blue, E1 and E2, are predominantly class 2. So those are the best of the soils options that we have. So that's the priority. S2, SW, then S1, S3, W, and then E1, E2. Yes.
On the SW, would you explain that one again? I guess I missed it.
Right. So this is a third priority, is land that is not identified as high value, predominantly high value soils. So it's pretty complex with the soil classification system in Oregon. You have high value soils, and you have soils that aren't identified as high value. Soils that aren't identified as high value can also have a variety of soil classes, and the high value soils have a variety. It's a very specific evaluation of soils that led to this particular site being in that category of not predominantly. It's essentially
That farmland?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so farmland
Farmland with bad soil.
yeah, farmland with less valuable soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in layman terms, the SW piece, because of its soil, means the state says you have to consider that before you consider the sites that are south of Feedville Road because they have a higher quality of soil.
Right.
But the SW site has, proximity to residents and things like that, that make it have a separate.
right. Yeah, it's a complex mapping analysis that gets to these answers. And we don't typically see priority 3 soils. We typically see, yeah, 4.
Just a question on the soils. Is it categorized by that because of its arability, or is it categorized like that based on like it's an ability to build on this, I guess?
Oh, it's about the productivity of farming.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not about your ability to build these or housing or, it's just about the soil for farming productivity. On farmland, on forest land, it's about the productivity for growing trees. It says, here's a summary, and you can see the interesting thing with SW is it's also class 4 soils. It's just a different type of class 4 soils that are valued less by the state, which puts it in that third priority. So the first priorities are S2 and SW. Then we have the 3 worst quality, highest value soils. And then the last is the highest quality, highest value soils. So what we did here was we brought in, as we had to do we're proposing to bring in the sites that are the highest priority. Seem to work best from an extension of utilities and urban form. It's next to the UGB. It's also next to industrial areas and existing data centers. And so what we're proposing the first round that we're looking at here is just looking at sites that are to the south and are the highest priority for inclusion. We didn't want to try to go across the river before we looked at these sites, and we didn't want to try to go into the highest value farmland before we looked at these sites. And so that's how we ended up with this proposed expansion area. Is, as you can see with S3 on the east side, it's a very abnormal shape because it has a canal that goes through the middle of it. And what we got from Union Pacific, this whole property is Union Pacific's north and south of the canal, is Union Pacific wanted to retain the area on the south side of the canal for their uses, and they were fine with letting go the area on the north side of the canal for other uses. And that's what they told us. We typically don't consider railroad land to be available. It just is. They are the law on their. Let this land go for other uses. We considered it available. And but what that means is with this strange site size and configuration, it's 379 acres, and we have a 100-acre minimum, but we can only get 2 hyperscale data center sites on this property because of the way it looks. And so that gives us a total of 894 acres of need of land to meet the need for 6 of the sites. So even though we need 9 sites with a minimum of 100 acres, this is a parcels are configured. They aren't all set up to be nice little 100-acre blocks. And this is a little bit of a zoom in of that area for folks who want to take a look. I don't know if anyone has questions
Are S1 and S2 also owned by the railroad?
No.
No.
So just because we're talking about hyper data centers, if we expand that, other entities could still build on those smaller acre areas. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, if they're inside the urban growth boundary, then they can build for urban uses, but yeah.
So we're not limiting.
If you bring in land for a specific site need, a specific type of industry need, you have to reserve that land for that need. And this is something that the state requires. You can't just, say, well, I need 600 acres, 900 acres, bring that land in, switch it over to residential, build out your homes, say, hey, we still need 600, 900 acres, so that's not allowed. And so we look at this and part of what we're doing, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, is how do we make sure that these sites are retained for this specific need that's identified in Hermiston's EOA to serve Hermiston's needs. And part of that is reserving that land for this type of use specifically. So the length of time, if you use the land, so it's a really interesting question, but if you bring in, this is complex, because if you brought in 100 acres for this, for one site, and then you didn't use it, it couldn't ever be used until you used it for that use, or you just return it back out of your UGB. You could leave it out of your UGB again, and try to go through the process again to find a different site if that site didn't work. But it's essentially, until it's used, it can only be used for this. And so it could be 20 years, it could be is sort of in perpetuity, otherwise it has to return outside the UGB.
But you could also do the legwork to redo your EOA and your housing needs analysis or something.
Right, you'd have to go through a significant process.
Yes.
And yeah, this is something that the state is really not fond of, is cities claiming a need, bringing land in, and then using it for something else. And we saw the state's been burned by this. In the 90s, Hewlett Packard, there's a big craze for Hewlett Packard sites. And so basically every city in the Willamette Valley had a big site reserved for Hewlett Packard, chip manufacturing, whatever. I'm in, and then they all came back to the state and said, it's been, 10, 15 years. Can we build houses on them? And eventually that's what happened to most of them in most of those cities. And so the law is pretty specific now that if you bring it in for a specific site need, then you need to preserve it for that. And so that's what we'd be doing here. There are, land use is not A or B, it's not a binary situation. So there are ways that it could be used for this use, and then also used for other uses once it is used for a hyperscale data center. You bring in these sites, and the hyperscale data centers come in, they build out their sites, and then what happens with the land that's left? Is it efficient to leave it fallow, right? Or is it efficient to try to do something else? And so that's not something that you can do right now, but it's something, if you look at down the line, how are you using this land 5 years, 10 years after it develops? Can it be used more efficiently? Can you do something else? And this is something that's always, in Oregon's system, you can always look for ways to make things more efficient down the line.
Okay, but now, I don't understand, because you said you couldn't use that for anything else.
There's a subtlety here where if you build a hyperscale data center on the site, there might be land left over on that site. And you can't put another hyperscale data center there. So what do you do with that land? And that's down the line. You have met the goal, you've met the objective because that land is used for what you wanted to use it for. But maybe there's some other land there that you could also use efficiently for something else. And
Can I give them maybe an example? Recently, the Cook site, we ended up getting back 45 acres of that because it could. But it would be the same kind of thing.
Mhm.
I see that S3, there's kind of two big areas where you could probably put 100 acres, and then there's some of the skinny areas that if we developed it, then it would be potentially okay to use it for other industrial uses likely, because that's what would be compatible with the things that are going on around it.
Correct. It wouldn't be,
Exactly.
you could say that little skinny part of S3 could be built on tomorrow, but after data centers have occupied 300 of the 379 acres, then yeah, that remaining portion is still available.
The industrial.
Yes.
And you'd have to go through a process and it'd come back in front of this body and the state to do that.
So I have a question. Since our EOA, like you mentioned, the need was about 9, and with what is presenting right now, it should meet about 6, even though the acreage is suitable for 9. So how does this work out then? Are we waiting for 6 and then we go back and ask for 300 more? How would this work?
And that's perfect. That's a
Yeah.
great question. And that's something that we have thought about a lot. And what we have is some reticence at the state level about the scale of the expansion. And this is a lot of land and it's a lot of acres. And so we believe there is this demand, and the EUA shows the demand here. And so rather than getting into a fight about moving across the river to the west or moving especially into farmland on the east, that high value, high class farmland that's the lowest priority for expansion, let's bring this stuff in. It's highest priority. It's got the least amount of conflicts. It's next to industrial. And if this develops, as we think it will, a lot of development in the near future, then we can show the state, this is real. This is a real need that's actually developing out, and we need 3 more sites. And then we can move ahead. That's the reason.
Thank you.
So that high-value farmland that you talked about, E1 and E2, I noticed that Stanfield's UGB is right below there. Is there anything keeping Stanfield from making a move for that land before we have a chance to develop ours? And
An identified need.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Stanfield has a lot of land in the north as well. Just like when we talk about our housing need, we have enough land in our UGB based on our studies to accommodate about 50 years of residential need. So it's very hard for us to expand residentially unless something significant happens to our residential inventory. And
a demonstrable need to
Right.
do something like that.
Yeah. And, the other piece of the puzzle, things that we're working on here in Hermiston, how do we serve it? Does the city have the facilities to serve these industries? And so, yeah, for somebody else to do that, it'd be the same process that they'd have to do, but they'd also have to have the facts that support it. So the other things that are going on, we have a lot of additional pieces of this project to set the foundation and all of the pieces that we need to go through the state approval. And civil engineering analyses for these areas. How do we serve it? What needs to happen inside and outside of the UGB in order for these to develop in this way? Do we have the capacity? And make sure that it works. And so we are fairly close to seeing some information on this from them. There's no negative feedback so far. And so we feel pretty confident that that they will find that it is feasible and efficient to expand in this area. We are also working on a public facilities plan, or PFP, update, which brings all of the utility plans together for the city, the public facilities plans, and make year and make sure that things are working together. And as part of this project, if we expand the urban growth boundary, there will be another piece of that public facility plan that makes sure that we have the projects that we need to go into these areas, and that's listed out and shown on the plans. So we have a good idea of what's going to happen inside and going to happen in the expansion area. The other piece that we think will be very helpful for everybody here is a conceptual master plan. How will it look? You know, if you think about these things, hard to think about what they look like on the ground and how they work with the sites. And so Mackenzie is where do the roads go? You know, how are they served? How much of the site do they take up with their buildings and parking and you know, substations and all of the pieces? We also are evaluating Umatilla County's comprehensive plan policies and the intergovernmental agreement, which is very important that we comply with. And so part of our work is making sure that we're consistent with our neighbors, and the county, in cases of urban growth boundary expansion, will need to co-adopt this urban growth boundary expansion. They'll co-adopt changes to the comp plan, which is their comp plan, in order to allow this. And so, you know, they're the partner in this process, and they're not some.
Here too, so.
Exactly. Yeah, it's what we do. And we are also looking at what do we need to change with the development code in order to enable these. And right now, it's a little bit of a, I'd say, cumbersome process with a PUD process to make it work. And I think we can make it a little bit more streamlined, especially in areas we are bringing in for this specific use. So let's make sure they don't have to go through a cumbersome process in order to develop exactly what you, if you approve this, will have said should go there. The state has a lot of interest in what we're doing here. ODOT, all of these agencies have a say in and approval authority in what we're doing. And so we bring them to the table and we talk to them, say, do you have concerns? We're following all the rules, and we work with them to make sure that they are on board. And then we have local engagement and you know, part of that work session, but also reaching out to our friends and neighbors to talk about this project. And that's part of the process that we are generally relying on. And that will lead then to a process in front of the Planning Commission and you. Any questions?
So there's cost involved in expanding our urban growth boundary. We talked briefly about the cost. And are there other things we're looking at in terms of expansion other than just the HDC lands? Because if we're going to be expending money, are we doing it in the most efficient way and looking at it globally across the entire UGB?
I think that's a good question. And that's something that we've been of need that are not hyperscale data centers. And how does that interact with what we're doing now? And how would that interact with all of these studies? And we could try to evaluate all of those other uses and where they could go. But that would be a significantly more robust process in dealing with that. And so we haven't been engaged to do that work, but we have been engaged to do the hyperscale data center priority. And so that's what we've been doing, is prioritizing hyperscale data centers. Well, I'd say there are a lot of implications to that, but in terms of big costs, who's paying those expansion costs? And that is probably going to be the developers of these sites, and the city would make sure that the developers would be paying at least their fair share of the facilities improvements, of what needs to happen in order to develop it. So if that's a piece of the puzzle, this is, let's say, a pretty significant partner in making sure that the large-scale improvements happen for the city. And that's what we would recommend in these scenarios. And I think that that's what you would want as part of this process.
Expanding an urban growth boundary requires a significant amount of staff time. It requires a significant amount of consultant time. And we always are cognizant of the amount of investment that's required. And so we generally have developers front those costs. And so far, we have not had somebody wanting to do that global look at smaller commercial sites. Residential needs we just did in 2021, so we know we're pretty solid on our residential end. We don't really need to do an urban growth boundary expansion to bring that land in. So we're trying to hit what is specific need at this point.
So how does this affect the,
So your boundary of the urban growth boundary doesn't change the zoning on the site. It'll be retained in county zoning until it's annexed, and then that'll be city. And so
right?
what
Mhm.
typically happens, and I assume, will be the case in Hermiston, is the city doesn't go out and annex properties that the property owners don't want to be annexed. And that is very, very common. A lot of people ask, if I'm in the UGB, are you going to annex me and then I pay more taxes? And that's, it's very normal for property owners to want to be annexed, to apply for annexation, and that be the step to annexing.
Proceed with this.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, it looks like we've gotten plenty of information to possibly make a decision on for the upcoming resolution. So appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Spencer, always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And unless anybody has any other questions, we will adjourn the manager work session and re-adjourn at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Adjourn to adjourn.
Readjourn. It's early yet, though. You'll get it.
What they said. mic so everybody can hear me. All right, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the Hermiston City Council and Urban Renewal Agency, Monday, February 24th edition. Call the meeting to order. And at this time, if you have cell phones, please silence those. We do have a declaration of a quorum. Councilor Litton has been excused. So those of you in attendance, please join me with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Okay. 1 through 5 out of the way. City Manager Smith, do we have any changes to the agenda?
None, Mr. Mayor.
None noted. Thank you, sir. So next up is our presentations, and I show here that we have a presentation from Executive Director Jesselyn Cole from the Path/Stepping Stones Alliance. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. How is everyone tonight? Good.
Sick.
Sick. I have a cough drop right now in my mouth. I'm recovering though. So in your packet is the 2024 annual report from Stepping Stone. Available for questions that you guys might have. So 2024 was a very full year. Got our shuttles in January, which have proven to be very useful, not only in the pickup and drop off each evening for our guests, but we were able to hire someone Monday through Friday and run errands with those for our members. So banking, grocery shopping, and whatnot. April, we moved on site. In June, we opened up the individual shelter units and the navigation center. So all 21 individual shelter units are currently occupied right now. And the navigation center is seeing members daily for use on the computers, checking in with staff, using the kitchen, doing their laundry. And we continue to see a lot of traffic. We actually had a city council member from Echo stop by today for a tour. I gave an update to them last week. And so got to show her around. In September, we had our first annual fundraising gala. Some of you made it. Thank you. Mark your calendars. This year it's October 11th, and it will be an enchanted garden theme. So I expect to see lots of you there. In October, our solar panel project started installation, and we are still waiting finalization on all the contracting for that, but they are in place. So we're just waiting for those to start working. And then the indoor fire suppression system in the navigation center so that we can install our kitchen stove in there. And in December, we celebrated 2 full years of consecutive night service in the sleep center. And then I'm just going to jump ahead to page 6. I struggled. Actually, I think I had a conversation with Councilmember Kelso about this, defining success in what we do. And this was the struggle for me in the annual report, just because it isn't an easy answer to say, yes, we've had 10 graduate, or we've had 5 successes, or whatever that might be, because each case in some impact stories, and have been trying to do a better job of that on our social media and just in conversations. And when I go around and share what we're doing, also sharing that impact and showing that as our successes, because those are indeed our successes. So it's not easy to numerize those, but being able to share the stories and the actual impact is, I think, welcomed by those who are supporting what we're doing. And then what we have going on for this year, so continuing to look for grants and donations to complete next steps and other projects. So always looking at diversity outreach at least once a month, and that is proving beneficial. We just had two people that we've seen regularly on outreach out on the Oxbow Trail actually enter into treatment programs. And then always doing more outreach by visiting groups and sharing what we're doing, as well as volunteer recruitment and continuing to build partnerships with other organizations in the area. And then, as I said, we did get that grant funding, so moving forward with what that looks like for the outdoor kitchen and getting our stove in place in the navigation center.
Um, with all the success that you're having, have you thought of like doing a video or something, or maybe making a video tour so the public can see this instead of coming and bugging you? They can actually see it through a video and some of those success stories out there.
Yes, so we did an impact video that we used at our gala, and I've shown it at some of the talks that I've given, like at Rotary. The success stories we have on there, the people asked for it not to be shared on social media, I'll say, not necessarily publicly, but so we could do a separate video though of just a tour. So yes, that
Any others? Sir Kelso.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for the work you do out there. I don't think that most people have the slightest idea of how much goes into what it is you do, and it's not just a job, it's a heart and soul effort. And so I just wanted to thank you, excuse me, from the bottom of my heart for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Roberts.
I read through your report and I thought it was great. And the success stories, one of the things that stuck out to me was the very bottom of page 6. The time and energy that members used to spend on finding food and worrying about shelter is now spent on the next steps towards self-reliance and independence. That this project has provided. You know, I encounter a lot of people who are struggling with homelessness, and one of the key things is a loss of hope, and you guys are really instilling that. And so I just want to say, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I think if you had to measure success, that statement right there would probably be the defining statement. You guys, you provide hope, and the continuation of your hard work. It shows in the community, and it shows the people that you've helped in those faces that have a little bit of sunshine on them. So we appreciate everything that you do, and we look forward to helping you out in the future.
Thank you.
Any others?
One of our legislators suggested that we try to get one of those success stories. So I've been working with Jesselyn, and we have somebody in mind, and at the right time at the legislature, we want to try to have them tell their story to highlight, you know, the good things that are happening and the reason why the state should help us financially to do that. So just wanted to let the council know that we're working on that.
I believe the operative word there is brilliant.
We were actually able to hire someone who used our services well over a year ago at this point, and he's in recovery and actually has his, why am I?
Peer?
Yeah, peer counseling, right? Yeah, peer certification.
Definitely success. Please keep up the good work.
I will do what I can.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at the section of the agenda for citizen input on non-agenda items. Anyone wishing to bring anything before the council that is not already on the agenda is asked to please do the following. 1, limit your comments to not more than 5 minutes. State your name and address, and please direct your comments to me. Anybody at all? Seeing none. We're now at through E. Do we have any public comment on consent agenda items A through E? Seeing none. Do we have any council comments on consent agenda items A through E? Seeing none. Are there any items that need to be removed? No. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items A through E?
So moved?
Second.
Let's see, I got moved by Counselor McCarthy and seconded by Counselor Duran. I got bookend.
Yes.
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 The motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Congratulations to our two new Parks and Rec committee members, Jay Ego and Doug Minton. See Mr. Minton in the audience. Welcome aboard, sir.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, we had no items removed from the agenda, so moving on to resolutions. We have resolution 2355, contract award. Do we have any conflicts?
I do. I work for AWS.
Counselor Hayward has recused himself from resolutions items A and B and will be leaving the dais. All right, resolution 2355, contract award, aquifer storage and recovery improvements, phase 1. City Manager Smith.
Yeah, Mr. Morgan.
Mr. Morgan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this evening, we've got these next two agenda items, resolutions 2355 and 2356, both pertaining really to the same topic, so I'm going to cover them both in the same staff report. So the first resolution, 2355, really pertains to a water supply agreement with Amazon Web Services. So I'll get more into the water supply agreement first. Maybe. There we go. There's a lot to this water supply agreement, so I included a lot of detail in your agenda packet that hopefully you had a chance to read through. And so I'll go into a lot of detail here, but generally speaking, what you should leave understanding is this is a water supply agreement with Amazon Web Services that largely relies on the technology of aquifer storage and recovery, or ASR. The agreement supports multiple hyperscale data center campuses yet to be constructed. Particularly from the popular media about how much actual water is consumed by data centers. So I think a lot of folks think that they use a lot more water than they actually do. But one of the major components of this water supply agreement is that it will actually result in a net increase of drinking water for local residents during our peak summer demand of around 100 million gallons per year. So I'll get into that and explain that a little bit. Also important to keep in mind, this water supply agreement would have the company pay for all of the construction costs associated with this agreement. And then also, probably the most important thing that you're probably going to get hit with numerous times over the coming years from high water rates, while Amazon's getting a sweetheart deal. Through this water supply agreement, Amazon will be paying the exact same water rates as all other customers within the community. So can't stress that point enough. So a lot of background here to cover. So I think a lot of folks mostly, when they think of our water systems, they think specifically about the city's water system. So that's just kind of a general map of the city. We have about 80 miles of water main and nearly 6,000 customers, 6,000 individual meters that we deliver water to from the city's water system, and that supports a population of around 20,000 people, along with some commercial and a couple of industrial users within the city. Additionally, though, Umatilla. And so the regional water system has about 14 miles of main, including about 9 miles going from the Columbia River nearly straight south through the city of Hermiston down to Feedville Road. And it's a very unique utility in the sense that it supplies an awful lot of capacity to some users. But the city system has in the thousands of users. The regional water system really only has 6 customers total, none of which are residential. So it's a system that is entirely geared and predicated towards serving large-scale industrial users. So generally speaking, the regional water system consists of an intake pump station on the Columbia River at the Port of Umatilla, a large treatment plant down at the intersection of Feedville and Highway 207. By current customers take just raw river water, but that treatment plant does have the capability to treat water to a potable drinking water standard to send some water into the city if we choose to use that. So the regional water system, water rights capacity is about 27,000 gallons a minute, but on the ground right now this summer we'll be able to flip the switch and pump out about 20,000 gallons per minute of water. But meanwhile, in the wintertime, our actual demand in the winter from customers is only in the range of around 8,000 gallons per minute of water. Similarly, you'll see that same dynamic taking place on the city's water system. So this is a chart that shows actual water purchased from the city of Hermiston's water system in calendar year 2024. So you can see that covers about 5,900 meters. And so you can see that distribution over the course of the year. We see a strong increase in demand when folks are watering their lawns for the most part. So in July, we sold almost 260 million gallons of water to customers within the city from the city system. But in January, we're only selling about 40 million gallons of water. So we have an awful lot of capacity to be able to supply water in the summertime, but nobody wants to buy it in the wintertime. So lots of capacity available in the wintertime. So also one of the things that's important to keep in mind, you know, that 260 million gallons available or that we're delivering in July, if you average that over the course of 31 days in July, it comes out to about 8.5 million gallons average per day. But when we're planning our system, we're planning for accommodating that peak day demand. So, you know, like July 20th, 2021, when it hit 118 degrees in Hermiston and didn't drop below 80 degrees for 5 days in a row, you know, that's really what our system is designed in order to be able to accommodate. And we weathered that heat dome just fine. And so really, when we see some peak day demands, we could be pushing over 10 million gallons of water with really no problem based on the infrastructure that we have in place on the ground right now. Meanwhile, in the wintertime, that averages out to supplying about 1.4 million gallons of water is what the actual demand is. So we've got the on-the-ground capacity right now. You know, I could call up the water department and tell them to start pumping and treating, and we could churn out 10 million gallons a day tomorrow if we needed to, but nobody needs that water in February. So that's generally keeping in mind how our demand works over the course of the year. So how will this water supply agreement work, you know, in detail? So conceptually speaking, what we'll be doing is we'll be pumping up to about 400 million gallons of water from the Columbia River over the course of the winter time, approximately from the beginning of October through the end of March, and then treating that and storing it in the deep basalt aquifer underground. And so then that will allow future data center campuses to pull water from that stored water in the summertime, and that will result in them being able to cool their data center campuses without pulling any additional water drop from the Columbia River during the summertime. So again, as I mentioned, I'll just kind of walk you through, you know, how we're getting to this point. So the water starts out in the Columbia River at the intake station, follows the pipeline south to Hermiston, goes through our treatment plant, and then goes east down Feedville Road to get to the well that is on your agenda this evening to approve the construction of that. So everything, all that capacity that I'm showing right there, again, that exists, that's on the ground right now, that's already been bought and paid for by the existing customers. And so we're just sitting on that investment for the most part in the winter without getting any return on that investment from actual users. So as I mentioned, we'll send that water, let's see if it shows up here. No. We'll send that water down Feedville Road. send it down Feedville Road to, there's right there approximately. ASR number 3, that's the well that we're proposing to drill in between two Amazon data center campuses that are currently under construction. So that is phase 1 of the water supply agreement, is just simply drilling the well and then beginning to build the bubble. So we'll drill the well, and these are just kind of some cross sections that our geologists have put together. On the left-hand side, that shows all of our existing groundwater wells that we have in the city. We have 5 existing groundwater wells, 1 that's pretty shallow, 4 that are into the deep basalt aquifers. This is going to be similar to the one that's on the far right-hand side. It's about 1,500 feet deep. That schematic on the far right-hand side, you can see, just shows the anticipated geology that we're going to be running into when we drill this well. The blue hashed areas are where we would anticipate to find what they call water-bearing zones. So that's where the actual water is going to be that we're going to encounter as we go down. The dark gray shaded areas are the basalt rock that we'll be having to go through to reach down into that area. So we'll deliver the water to this well and start pouring it down the well and start pushing that native groundwater out and building a bubble of cool, treated, potable water from the river. And on this one, you may be able to see it a little bit on that TV, but those green circles are highly conceptualized representations from the geologists that show basically the extent of where they anticipate that bubble to reach out to. And so you can see 3 circles on there. We've been working on this project for about 4 years at this point. We've examined multiple different well locations, and so that's why the one that we're talking about this evening is labeled ASR 3. It's our 3rd option after everything taken into account. So that's showing all 3 possible ASR locations, but really we're looking at just that one on the bottom that's closest to Feedville Road. So again, conceptually, we'll be pumping water from the Columbia River in the wintertime, storing it down in the aquifer. The data centers will pull the water in the summertime for no additional Columbia River water needed in the summer. So also I mentioned, again, I said I couldn't reiterate it enough, and I'm going to reiterate it again. Amazon will be paying all of the exact same water rates as all existing customers within the city for the water that they use. But additionally, as part of what they call their water positive goal, they hope to return more water to local communities where they operate than they actually utilize. And so that's a component within this agreement, is not only will they be paying for the water that they use, but they will also be paying for at least 100 million gallons per year more than what they actually utilize. And that 100 million gallons per year that they're paying for over and above what they use is to then be put down into the aquifer for the community's use out into the future, if and when we need it into the future. So we have no immediate plans for needing that water, but we'll continue to build the aquifer and expand our water rights that way. So, for example, through this agreement, if, say, Amazon used 50 million gallons in 1 year, they would pay us for actually treating and injecting 150 million gallons of water. So they would have the option to receive 50 million gallons of cooling water, leaving 100 million gallons in the aquifer for the community's use into the future. And then probably the single most important component of the water supply agreement is the instantaneous flow that we guarantee. So there's 2 phases to this agreement. Phase 1 is building the bubble, and then phase 2 is actually delivery of water to future campuses. And so in this agreement, we're guaranteeing that upon successful completion of phase 1, which there's some specific components and criteria for defining what successful completion of phase 1 was, that will then tip us over into actually executing phase 2. And then upon the completion of phase 2, we will guarantee supplying for Amazon's use water in instantaneous flows up to 4,500 gallons per minute to meet their peak demand. So again, I mentioned, it's 118 degrees outside for a week solid. They might, after full build out, maybe hit about 4,000 gallons per minute, that week. But during the winter time, they're not going to be using a single drop of water, most likely, for cooling. So when we actually look to the water supply agreement in terms of volume that we're actually guaranteeing through this agreement, we're guaranteeing them 105 million gallons per year. And so if you were to walk that number backwards from a gallons per minute standpoint over the course of a year, that gallons per minute actually comes all the way down to just 200 gallons a minute. So don't take that 4,500 gallon per minute figure and run your own numbers and extrapolate that times 60 minutes times 24 hours times 365 days in a year, because you'll get an astronomical number which doesn't have any basis in fact. Really what we're guaranteeing them in terms of actual volume of water is that 105 million gallon figure. We just keep track of that 4,500 GPM figure so that we can design to meet their peak demand, knowing that there's a significant variance in how much they need depending on the season. So this is all predicated on aquifer storage and recovery. So ASR is a proven method to be able to store massive volumes of water. It's proven not just globally, but here locally. There's a number of cities that have been doing this for many years. City of Pendleton's been using ASR. They pump and treat Umatilla River water and inject that into the basalts. They've been running their system for over 20 years at this point. City of Kennewick does ASR, City of the Dalles, City of Prineville. So a number of other cities already operate ASR systems in Oregon. And to give you a sense of, when I say it stores massive volumes of water, that's just an image of our north tank that we constructed in 2018 up at the intersection of 10th and Punkett Center. That's 1 million gallon tank that cost us $4.5 million to construct. And so when we're talking ASR storage, we're literally talking on the scale of billions of gallons. We anticipate over the course of the 25-year agreement, we anticipate storing approximately 3.3 billion gallons over and above what will be utilized for Amazon for their cooling purposes. This is just another schematic that shows our existing groundwater wells. So yeah, here with the proposed ASR well, like I mentioned, we've been working on this with our geologists and consultants from GSI for about 4 years at this point. ASR is heavily regulated by the state Water Resources Department. And so we finally got our application together and submitted in July of this past year to OWRD, and they've been reviewing that. We anticipate approval of that application this summer. So we'll be drilling, and that's part of Resolution 2355. We'll be drilling a 1,500-foot deep hole. Again, remind folks what we're injecting is potable drinking water. Create a bubble down in the aquifer, and then because of the precision of this type of a system, there's other ways of recharging aquifers. There's also aquifer recharge, where you just put untreated surface water onto the ground, let it percolate into the ground. Much less precise system, but with this system where we're drilling a well and actually injecting the water straight into the ground, we anticipate to recover nearly a little over 95% of all the water that we put into the ground. So now one of the other questions, that may be good, but I think folks want to know, where's the water coming from in the first place? What's our total system capacity? I think folks are always concerned when we're dealing with large agreements, large corporate entities, that we're, running out of capacity, doing those types of things. So just kind of walk you through a little bit what we are looking at in terms of our water capacity. So this is a screenshot from our water system master plan. And so that shows all of our existing water rights, including a number which have not even been developed, but we have on the books to be able to provide significant additional water into the future. But specifically, the portion of the water right that we'll be utilizing is that one right there. So that's coming from our Port of Umatilla Columbia River water right with the regional water system, currently capable of supplying about 1,500 gallons per minute. So going back to look at on the city side of things, to understand how much capacity we have and how much we'll need in the future, we can look at this, and that shows how much actual demand we have over the course of a year, which when you add up all of those bars, it comes out to about 1.4 billion gallons per year. But I think we need to kind of invert this graph to get a sense of, we have the infrastructure in place to be able to meet that supply capacity in July, but what about all of the capacity that exists there when we're not, selling to paying customers? So those light green bars, those all show, we have the capacity to be able to meet that demand we know in July right now with no problem. So that means that in January, February, November, December, we have well over 200 million gallons of capacity to be able to supply water to folks that not only we don't need currently, but nobody's paying us for that capacity. So it's actually costing the ratepayers money in the sense that we've invested in it, but we're not utilizing it. So all of that unused capacity that we sit on every single year is actually more than what we actually supply. So we're sitting on about 1.6 billion gallons a year of water volume capacity that nobody's paying us for. So really what we're looking at for ASR, again, I mentioned we'd only be injecting water over the course of the winter. So we'd be utilizing our capacity from the regional water system approximately October through March. And so those would be the time periods that we'd actually even be diverting some of our potential capacity to go into the ground to meet our summertime demand. So I kept showing that that's our unused capacity during normal operating conditions. And so the way that we normally operate our system is that we still leave a number of our built, existing, ready-to-go capacity completely untouched, even during our peak summertime season. So I mentioned previously the city's system has the ability to purchase treated potable water from the regional water system, but we have not chosen to do that for many years because it's frankly more expensive for the city's utility to purchase water at a retail rate from the regional water system just to turn around and then retail it to our own customers than it is currently to just produce water from our shallow groundwater wells within the city. So we have that capacity, it's there, we can turn the switch whenever we need it, but it's just simply more expensive for us to operate. So we have that capacity of around 1,500 gallons a minute. So that means that over and above that 258 million gallons that we supplied to customers last year, we still have at least nearly 70 million gallons of capacity just from the regional water system water alone. Additionally, when we know that we're going to be injecting about 100 million gallons a year in the summertime for our use if and when we need it, how would we potentially use that in the future? Well, we'd probably pull it out and use it to meet our summertime peak demands when we need it in the future. And so probably we would use most of it in our peak month, but if I just took June, July, and August and spread that 100 million gallons proportionally over those three, let's say we only pulled out 37 million gallons to meet our July need there. That means that in July, between our currently completely untouched potable drinking water capacity from the regional system and the water that we'll be injecting into the aquifer, we still have an extra, roughly 100 million gallons of capacity after this project moves forward. And so that is an increase of about 40% capacity over what our current peak monthly demand is. And so that 260 roughly million gallons, that supports all 20,000 residents within the community, all of the existing businesses, some of the industries. So it stands to reason that just in general, we could grow the community's demand by almost 40% before we even start to bump into some issues in that month with our existing built capacity, not to even say anything of our undeveloped capacity that we have in some of our other water rights. So that's kind of where we're at with existing water system capacity. So next thing that I wanted to touch on is some of the community impacts from this agreement. So there's benefit to fish and environmental concerns. I think I've talked about that quite a bit already this evening, but again, can't stress enough how important this should be. This should be celebrated by environmental and fish folks out there because we're supporting significant industrial development in the community with no additional water coming out of the Columbia River in the summertime. And the reason that's a big issue is because the summertime is when stream flows, decline to their lowest over the course of the year after the winter snowpack has, already flowed out to the ocean. So summer is when stream flows drop the most. That's when fish need it the most. And so this will support significant development without any additional water out of the Columbia in the summer. Additionally, farmers benefit significantly. Without getting too much into it, we anticipate that all the water that comes into these data center facilities, they also discharge a significant amount of that. And so generally speaking, associated with this agreement, we anticipate seeing probably somewhere in the range of around 50 million gallons a year discharged back out during the peak irrigation season. And this is good because we're going to be discharging it to the Hermiston Irrigation District's canals. And ultimately, Amazon will have paid the freight on that. So agricultural users, they cannot sustain the cost of pumping water all the way from the Columbia River 9 miles uphill to where they need it, like industrial customers can. And so this way, Amazon is paid to pump it all the way down there. They've used it, and now it's already there, elevated up on the bluff, and can go into the waterworks of the Hermiston irrigation system and reach those farmers. And so what does 50 million gallons mean generally? So there's a number of ways that it could be utilized. We'll be discharging this into the Hermiston Irrigation District's canals, which is ultimately fed by Cold Springs Reservoir. So Hermiston Irrigation District holds water behind Cold Springs Reservoir and releases it over the course of the season. And so 50 million gallons in the Hermiston area and our climate could support fully irrigating at least 60 acres and our highest value commodities in the region in potatoes and onions. Or what's more likely to happen is we're going to add that to Hermiston Irrigation District system, and that will allow HID to actually just release less water from Cold Springs Reservoir over the course of the year and hopefully extend their irrigation season a little bit longer. And so also I think it's nice to point out that largely by sending this water to the Hermiston Irrigation District, HID is different than some of the other irrigation districts in the region in that I would say it supports probably the largest number of small farmers than any of the other irrigation districts. There's at least one other irrigation district that only has 6 customers. HID has many, many more relatively small farmers, so that's not just water that's going to some big mega farm out there. This is predominantly small farmers that'll be benefiting. From the standpoint of future generations, we're, like I mentioned, injecting about 3.3 billion gallons into the aquifer over the term of the agreement. Still to be determined, how beneficial that will be. We hope that at least it might slow aquifer level decline. We know that we're in a region of declining aquifers. The city itself, we pull water from the deep basalt aquifers, and we know that the groundwater levels are declining over time. So if we're adding significant amount of water to the aquifer, the hope is that we could at least help to slow some aquifer decline, possibly stop, maybe reverse. So that'll be an interesting exercise to watch as we move forward to see the beneficial impact on the aquifers. And then the final benefit really is financial. One, we're getting a paying customer during our off-peak season to pay for a lot of this infrastructure that we already have just sitting there throughout the winter. But also really specific, and I could get down into the detail on this, but by them purchasing treated potable water from the regional water system, that will help drive down the cost per unit of purchasing and treating water from the regional water system. So we anticipate in recent years, the cost of buying water from the regional water system when Shears Foods was operating was nearly $3 per thousand, which to give you a sense, the city of Hermiston, obviously, we then turn around and retail that to our customers at $3.80 per thousand gallons. So there was not much margin to cover the cost of conveying and treating that water. So we anticipate that once we're purchasing at least around 205 million gallons per year, we anticipate the cost of purchasing that water to drop closer to well under $1 per thousand gallons. And so that will benefit ultimately the city's water utility customers because that will make our ability to purchase water from the regional water system significantly more affordable for our customers within the city. Now, so I got into a little bit of the financial component, but in terms of operating the system and the agreement before you, so phase 1, what's before you as far as resolution 2355, that is to construct the actual ASR well. So we're going to drill the well, but also install all of the necessary equipment to put the water down the hole. Again, Amazon is paying 100% of that cost, 100% of the cost that you see on this slide. What's being asked for approval tonight from the resolution is just award of the drilling contract for about $6.1 million, but you can see the other costs that we anticipate running into. So the total cost of phase 1 is in the range of around $8.1 million. So then phase two, I mentioned there's a couple of trigger points that are included in the agreement before we move on to phase two. Requires first and foremost that Oregon Water Resources Department approves our limited license application for the ASR. We fully anticipate that to come through this summer. And then additionally, I should have been a geologist. It's kind of like being a meteorologist. It's always hard to get a straight answer out of them in terms of, well, how much is this well going to produce? And you say, well, we'll find out. So we feel, currently we're projecting that the well is going to produce somewhere in the range of about 1,800 gallons per minute. But we'll consider phase one to be successful as long as the well produces at least 1,000 gallons per minute. Depending on how much it produces, that will change the scope potentially of phase two. It'll just require some additional above ground storage and some of those things. So the $12 million price tag for phase two is still to be determined based on the outcome of the phase one improvements. But again, this agreement requires that whatever those improvements turn out to be in phase two, Amazon will cover the cost of those improvements. So then operationally, on the financial side, there's really two steps to this. So you can see there's the initial contribution phase, which that would be what we consider to be building the bubble. So we're treating water and injecting it down into the aquifer. And so we build the bubble because we are injecting cool water with a certain water quality down into the aquifer. And so we don't want to then turn around and just start pulling water right back out to the point that we've, sucked all of that surface water, that's now disappeared and now we're getting back into the groundwater. So we have to build a bubble of sufficient size and then monitor it to make sure that, water's not springing up out of, different holes, all over town. So we build the bubble, monitor it for several years, and then we start to pull water out of the ground after several years. And so the company is through this agreement. That's a screenshot directly from the agreement. They'll be paying to inject a little over 1 billion gallons of water over the next 4 years after it becomes after phase one is complete. And then once we move into the operational side of things and they're actually pulling water every summer for their cooling needs, then we anticipate that they will be purchasing roughly 200 million gallons per year. And at that point, that's when they will actually be paying the then current city of Hermiston water rates. So that's where I say they will be paying the exact same rates that everybody else within the city is actually utilizing. Because in phase one, they're not actually receiving any of that water. All of that water is going into the ground. So then moving on to the ongoing replenishment, that's part of the water that they would actually receive for cooling water. So this is just the same screenshot. I just jumped ahead. So that's just talking about the ongoing replenishment portion of the agreement. So again, I covered an awful lot, and there will be a quiz later, but generally speaking, we're using aquifer storage and recovery to support multiple hyperscale data centers. We'll see a net increase of around 100 million gallons a year for local drinking water, totaling about nearly 7% of our total drinking water capacity within the city. Amazon's paying for all of the construction costs, and Amazon's going to be paying all of the exact same water rates as all of the other customers. With that, I'd stand for any questions.
Councilor Roberts?
So I know you've said that Amazon is going to pay for this, and you've been very clear on that. How does that work, and how does that affect our current fiscal year? Because as I read the agreement, it talks about a reimbursement, so I'm assuming you'll see an expenditure on the budget, but you also see an inflow. Can you talk about how that works and whether or not that's going to affect any current projects the city has going?
Yeah, and Councilor Roberts asked this question earlier today, so I appreciate the heads up. So it allows us to kind of give a better answer. So, yeah, so it's technically set up as a reimbursement, but the way that we've operated all of these agreements in the past is it's a reimbursement in the sense that the city is the one actually holding the contract. So the contractor goes out, does the work, they turn around and bill the city. They don't just hold on to their invoices and bill us once the project's done. They start to bill us as the project's going along monthly. So they will bill us, each month for their work as they've done it. Once we get that, we turn around and check to the contractor, and simultaneously we then submit an invoice to Amazon for our reimbursement. So we are getting, it's a reimbursement in that sense, but it's near instantaneous. So we shouldn't really be out of pocket any more than maybe 1 month's worth of expenses at any given time, just depending on how the timing of the monthly calendar works. And so it won't be impacting any of our, borrowing capacity or any of those types of things. But from a budget standpoint, one thing you'll notice is it does tend to almost kind of artificially inflate the budget in the sense that we do have to show it, every expense that we incur, even though it's fully offset by incoming revenue, we have to show that as an expense in our budget. So that drives up what looks like we're spending, because we are spending it out, but we're also bringing that revenue in to offset that expense. So you will see, an increase in the total expenditures.
And just one addition, the supplemental budget that we just adopted actually added this ASR project because we didn't know it was going to go this fiscal year, so.
Councilor Meyer?
Okay, so on the taking water out of the Columbia, can you only take it out during those timelines you gave, March to October or whatever you?
No, so our water rights from the Columbia, they're a municipal and industrial right in the sense that we could take it all year long. But we just simply don't, because we don't have the demand for it right now, so.
Always a big deal.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah, so right now, the total water rights associated with the regional water system is 27,000 gallons per minute. And so that's where I mentioned currently in the wintertime, we're only seeing actual demand for around 8,000 gallons per minute. So significant, capacity in terms of the actual demand in the wintertime versus, what our water right is.
Councilor Brown?
Just have a question on the bubble, and just wanting to know a little bit more about that. How does that look like? I mean, I know I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but I guess more or less, how does it look like? I know when you were showing, like the table and the different soils, I guess, does it all get put into one spot? And I guess just knowing a little bit more about it, the diameter of this, I mean, if it's gonna hold billions of gallons of water, it must be pretty big in size.
Yeah, so, well, I don't have a good visual for you, but yeah, so you remember on that visual, it showed the different water-bearing zones. And so those are areas where there's unconsolidated gravels and sands in between rock layers, and that's where water was trapped in between lava flows, back when that was occurring. And so the water's trapped in there. We're going to be putting water into the ground, and it's going to be pushing out into the basalt, into the aquifer, essentially. So we're pushing that existing native groundwater out, and so that will push our water quality out into the existing aquifers. So it's not necessarily it's probably more like a pancake, I guess, in terms of if you were trying to visualize it. So it's going to be, wide, but maybe only 30 to 40 feet deep, depending, because that's how deep some of those water-bearing zones are, maybe only be 30 or 40 foot deep. Additionally, it's spelled out in the drilling specs. We're specifically including open screen on some of those water-bearing zones, but we're also flanging off and not going to be putting water or taking water from some of those other water-bearing zones as we go down, because they're in different aquifers, and the state is very keen on trying to keep those different aquifers separated. So we're very specifically targeting some of those water-bearing zones with where we're going to be injecting water. So, and that's one of the other reasons why we monitor it for several years after, to make sure that the water that we put in is staying where it's supposed to go and isn't migrating to one of those different aquifer levels.
Another question, but if anybody
Okay.
else has another one. I guess I asked this question the last time we had a discussion like this about assuring that the water that we're putting in, that we also have access to that same water back. And I know in your presentation you said that we'd have a good percentage of that water that will be available for us, I guess, as a city. My concern was to make sure that there was, I guess, no leakage, and I guess how we set this bubble up. And so
Yeah, and so it's really it's really all about the water rights. And so by us injecting the water, Oregon Water Resources recognizes that we're injecting this, and so we'll be able to keep track of how much water is going down the hole, and so that actually expands our water right. So we will not be tapping into our water right to be able to, because we have water rights into that aquifer currently. And so before we start counting against those water rights, OWRD will count this water as being ours and part of our water rights. So there's not like a physical barrier that would prevent, a farmer, 2 miles away from, sucking on the aquifer when it starts to pull that out. But at the end of the day, municipal water rights are the last to get shut off in this situation. And so we're expanding our water right. We're not necessarily guaranteeing that it's not going to maybe migrate and get used by somebody else, but our water right is significantly expanded.
Thank you.
Any others? I only had one question. So, in regards to the water we're getting, that Amazon Data Services is putting back into the canal, basically. Is there any discussion or any working out with the irrigation district as using that as part of our water, possibly for use at EOTech for irrigation?
Yeah, the hard part with that is EOTech is uphill of the HID.
Right. I understand, we don't get the water, that particular water, but, whether it be like as an exchange, because, we're providing them with basically, like you said, Amazon's paying for the work. They're paying for the elevator ride.
Mhm.
Whereas, we need water up there. And, if we're giving them this water, little fair trade, I don't know, is that something that's been worked on?
I think that
Yes.
that'll factor in future discussions. It's not something currently.
And one of the difficulties in that is EOTech is in a different irrigation district.
Okay.
And so we'd have to go through a process of moving districts. And so it may, like Mark says, in the future be a part of what we do, but as of right now, we haven't looked at that.
All right. Well, one more question. Okay.
I just had a blank right now, so I'll hold back my question.
Okay, we'll have more council comments when it comes up. Okay, so regarding Resolution 2355, are there any public comments? This is for the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Improvement Phase 1. Okay, seeing none. Do we have any other additional council comments regarding 2355?
I remember now. You mentioned earlier, Assistant City Manager Morgan, about that we're in a critical groundwater area. Can you please explain to me again how this is going to help these other critical groundwater areas and support the community overall? Because for me, it sounds like this is going to benefit more than the city. It's also going to benefit the county and people out there. So can you talk a little bit more about that again?
Yeah, I think generally we'll just have to see how it impacts the aquifer. I mean, we're going to be putting groundwater into the ground, and so I think it'll do nothing but help to at least slow some of the groundwater declines.
So basically, last in, first out type thing. We put that water in, it's ours until we get past the amount of water that we put in, and then that's when we start using our water rights. So
Exactly.
leaving the additional water in there helps because we're not using that initially. Okay. Any other council comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 2355 and lay upon the record?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Barone, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. Can I get a roll call?
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously 6-0. We have one absent. All right, Resolution 2356, Water Service Agreement with Amazon Data Service. Again, City Manager Smith
We've covered it. If you have
Covered it.
any questions.
ad nauseum. Okay, any public comment in regards to 2356, the Water Service Agreement with Amazon Data Services? Seeing none. Council, any additional comments? None. Can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 2356 and lay upon the record?
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Meyer, seconded by Counselor Kelso. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes 6-0. Can we invite Counselor Hayward back in, please? All right, a lot of work to cover, a lot of the wet stuff. So nice job, guys. Appreciate that. Definitely will make for all that we can accomplish in the future. Welcome back, sir. Next up, Resolution 2357, initiate urban growth boundary amendment. City Manager Smith.
Yeah, Mr. Spencer.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of additional staff report for this. We did spend a work session on it tonight, but what the resolution in front of you is doing is directing staff to move forward with preparing applications and the necessary documentation to prepare an application for an urban growth boundary amendment. You're not expanding the urban growth boundary tonight, but you're saying, staff, please go ahead and prepare the necessary paperwork to begin that process.
Okay. So here we go. Big session at the beginning, learned a little bit about a lot, or is it a lot about a little? Okay, any public comment on Resolution 2357, initiate urban growth boundary amendment? Seeing none. Any public or council comment? Also none. Can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 2357 and lay upon the record?
So moved.
Second.
I'll give that one to Counselor Roberts. Motion by Counselor Barone, second by Counselor Roberts. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously 7-0. All right. One of the motions that was brought up in one of our last meetings, discussion of business license ordinance and nonprofit exemption. City Manager Smith.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We recently adopted this business license ordinance, and at your most recent meeting, you directed staff to bring this for full discussion at the council. And I would like to just a couple of things. First, I want to state it is our opinion that the city did nothing unconstitutional, nor bordering on anything unconstitutional in relationship to the adoption of our business license ordinance. So we'll start with that. Then the second piece, there are kind of two sections of the ordinance that I'd like to just point out. One, the purpose of the ordinance is laid out in the first portion. And it says, one, the first purpose that's stated is ensure that each business is conducted in compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and ordinances, and in a manner comporting with public health, safety, and general welfare. So we're trying to make sure we're keeping people safe. That's one of the stated purposes. It also states that we were looking to secure revenue to defray the cost of providing services to businesses that receive those services, and then obtain information for emergency responders, planning, building, and economic development. So those were our purposes, and we think that the ordinance moves us towards those purposes, including the way the current exemption is written. The second portion is the exemption in 119.05, and there was a number of exemptions. This is letter H. The following must obtain a business license but are exempt from payment of the license fee. One, an entity registered with the Secretary of State as a nonprofit corporation, not-for-profit corporation. Any business exempt from paying business license fees or taxed by federal or state constitution or law. Any business exempt from paying property tax. So that's exempt from the license fee, but not still asking for the license. So we also did a little bit of research to look, I mean, there are many cities across Oregon who have similar language that we do, where they require the churches or the nonprofits to get a license, but don't pay the fee. There's some that require them to pay the fee. There's some that completely exempt them from all of it. So it's really across the board. So from a staff standpoint, you'll notice we're just looking for direction. If the council wants to make an alteration, we'll bring back those changes. If no changes, we're happy to continue to utilize the ordinance as adopted. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Meyer.
So if we don't do anything, then, the churches and not-for-profit have to get the license, but they don't pay.
That's correct.
Okay.
McCarthy.
That only counts if they've also registered as a nonprofit, because I think one of the points, am I correct in that? Because I believe one of the points that has been brought up is that a church doesn't necessarily have to register as at least a 501c3.
Well, I think you could read the ordinance to say if they're conducting business in the city, even if they're not a registered nonprofit, they would then also be required to get a license.
Okay. Just for clarification.
Yeah, because it does say any entity registered.
Yeah, those are exempt from the payment of the license fee. That's what the three exemptions that I read, those are all exempt from the paying the fee.
What was your question?
It was brought up that a church under the right conditions does not have to register itself as at least a 501c3 to achieve a nonprofit status.
Well, what I think was stated that a church could operate, and as long as they didn't want donations made to them to be considered tax exempt, then they wouldn't necessarily have to register as a nonprofit with the state or with the IRS.
A church in that particular situation would not qualify under the exemption of paying the fee in this circumstance?
It still would, yes, they would qualify for the exemption.
How so?
They would potentially not, they'd be exempt from paying property tax potentially. And under number 2, where they would be, yeah,
Other
possibly
things
still
would
exempt,
then-
right.
Council.
So even though churches would be exempt from paying the fee under the current ordinance, they are not exempt from any penalties that might be incurred from not complying with the ordinance. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if they don't take their business license with them when they're doing business and have it readily available or on display, they could conceivably be fined for that up to $1,000 a day.
Conceivably. That it would not be our intention. That's not our intention with the businesses at this point in the process at all.
So we're not intentionally trying to go after nonprofits. We just want them to register just so we have an idea that they're in the community. We're not charging them or fining them. We just want them to register so when people are looking to come to this town, they're kind of knowing what's here, what churches, nonprofits are here, just basically giving the information out to people potentially moving here and stuff. And we don't find them right now at all.
Correct.
Any other questions of councilors? Yes, ma'am.
So how many churches would this impact?
We don't know how many churches exist exactly in the city. I mean, we could go around and do our best count from the street, but that would be all we could do.
Counselor Brown?
I think when I heard this come up in council the other day, I think a lot of maybe council was just making sure that there was no undue burden, I guess, like on any, uh, their churches or nonprofits. And, at least right now, I don't see a huge burden. I think it'd be a benefit to the community, but I also understand, just being a defender of amendments in the Constitution and how that might come into play with things. I appreciate the city, I guess leading off of that point that knowing that we are in the clear, that is very good, especially consulting with our attorneys. That makes me feel a little bit better because admittedly so, if there was any, I guess, any attack or any, maybe attack's too harsh, but anything that would cause an undue harm onto somebody by infringing on any amendment right, I think that would be cause for concern, and I don't really see that here.
Counselor Roberts?
I'm going to withhold comment for the moment. I just want to make sure we're going to have time after public comment, because I would like to hear if there is any public comment and absorb that before I kind of, make any remarks.
Right, yeah, right now this time is for us to ask questions of City Manager Smith. We'll have time for council comments after public comment.
Perfect, thank you.
So any other questions for City Manager?
I just want to ask either mayor or city manager. I know we have a counselor that's not here, and she was the one that brought it up in the first place. I guess, is there any comments or anything submitted by, I guess, one of our counselors? I just want to make sure that.
I didn't receive any.
I did not receive any additional comments over and above what she stated last week or last meeting.
Thank you.
Counselor Hayward?
Sorry. And what are you asking us to do here on this, so I fully understand it?
I'm not asking anything. I was directed by the council to bring back this item for topic of discussion, and we're open for any direction or non-direction, whatever the council would like to do.
Just want to make a point that the recommended action is to do nothing on the staff report, so.
Okay, looks like there are no more questions. Public comment.
Thank you, Mayor Primer and Council. And Dean Hackett, I reside here in Hermiston on 11th Place. And I am the one that brought the request to you to consider this. And I was really thankful that you brought it back for this meeting today. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you, City Manager, for bringing it back on the agenda. And I know that in the comments that he shared with you, I went through all of the comments that I'm sorry we weren't able to get that meeting together. My travel agenda didn't permit a further meeting, and
Sure.
but I am really thankful that you are considering this. And I know that looking at it as it is right now, it looks like this is very innocuous, very innocent, and possibly not violating. But what I have seen through my 54 years of ministry is I have watched the cities adopted this, and time went on as folks changed, personnel changed, times changed. This became a vehicle by which other controls began to put on the churches in very subtle and at first very limited ways, but they became greater. And some of the things that was mentioned, for example, making sure that the church facilities are and fire district, that the fire is aware. For the churches that I have pastored, we've always had fire inspections, and we've always made sure that they had to be required. A couple of churches I was at, we even had to have holding tanks on the property to make sure that we had for fire suppression. And so those things are handled in other ways, and building codes and things like that meet that. But this, while it's very innocent and it looks innocent now, become a vehicle in other places that I have seen, and pastoral friends that I have had around the nation, and authoritative positions that I have held. I have seen this become a snare that was later used that became a problem and began to limit the constitutional freedoms that our Constitution guarantees us, that there will be no laws made establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And I know that it is in your heart, I believe it's in our city management's heart, not to do that. So would you please make sure that there's no vehicle there for that to happen in the future by placing in the exemptions a clear exemption that churches and religious organizations do not have to register. And that just prevents everything that's needed. And so I'm hoping that you'll consider that. I want to be careful I'm not taking too much time, but that's what's on my heart in presenting this to you, that we don't put something in place that could later become a problem. And I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hackett. Any other public comment? All right, council comment. Councilor Roberts.
I want to first start by saying how much respect I have for Pastor Hackett. I've had the pleasure of speaking to him several times over the years. I've heard nothing but good things about him, and he runs a pretty good church out there. And so with that respect, I just want to say that on its outset, I just respectfully disagree about the constitutionality of it. One of the things he said was we cannot establish a religion or impede on the free exercise of religion. I think our founders were pretty good about how they wrote that amendment, and it wasn't to completely segregate government from church, and it wasn't to say that they couldn't cooperate in some fashion. I take deeply what he says about adopting something here that could be used later. I just respectfully disagree that I don't see that happening here. So it's my position that we take no action and leave the ordinance as written, but I do understand his arguments, and I've taken those to heart, and I appreciate his comments and time.
Councilor Hayward.
I get where he's coming from on this and everything. I just went through a leadership meeting this last week on this kind of topic of how we respect our government and respect authority. As a Christian and everything, I think we should be respecting our government for the laws they pass and everything. I don't see in this law saying that you cannot practice or anything by your faith or whatever denomination. I don't see that. It's just basically asking all the nonprofits and everything, we're not finding you to actually just register with the city for a business license so we know that you're in the city. So when somebody comes to offer help or is looking to move here and want to know about nonprofit, it's a little harder for us to say, hey, there's this many churches or this many nonprofits there in this town that can help. I don't see us finding you at all. We're working with you guys on this, saying, hey, this does not find you guys. You don't have to pay this, but we would like you to register with with the city. And I don't see us trying to overstep our boundaries and saying, hey, you can't do this in your church. It's just basically just asking you to register with the church, with the city. And by what I've been learning lately, I think we should be respecting our local government and the laws that they pass. I agree with what they passed, but I do get where the pastor's coming from. Understand, but if it was me, I would have to respect what the city did and say, yes, I agree with what you guys said.
Mr. Kelsel.
I'm a Christian as well, Alan, and I understand that the city, when we passed this body passed this ordinance, for some reason thought it would be a good idea to give themselves the regulatory authority of issuing licenses to churches. And I just do not see the benefit in doing that. To be honest with you, the city manager says we don't foresee fining anybody or using this as an enforcement tool. So if we're not going to do that, why have that power? Why do we need to do this in the first place? I think of all of the freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, the freedom of religion is one of the most sacrosanct that we have in this country. I don't see where it's the city's job to try and impose any regulation on churches in this community, and for that matter, on nonprofits. I don't think asking either of those sorts of entities to register once a year for a business license is onerous. I just question why we would do that to organizations whose whole goal is to improve people's lives in this city. So my position is that we exclude not only churches, but all nonprofits from this regulatory encumberment. Thank you.
So, any other comments, council comments? So, at this point in time, I need to either have a motion made or not. So, Councilor Roberts?
I would move that we take no action and leave the ordinance as written.
Second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded, moved by Councilor Roberts that we take no action, seconded by Councilor Meyer. Roll call.
So I understand how I'm voting. Can you explain?
Taking no action.
Yes.
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 No.
No.
Yes.
All right, looks like we got 5-2, 4-2, 4-2, 5-2,
5.
5-2,
5-2.
5-2 as to take no action and leave it as such with Councilor Duran and Councilor Kelso in dissent. The motion passes 5-2. All right, monthly financial report for January 2025. City Manager Smith.
Yeah, Mr. Palacios.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. I'm presenting the monthly financial reports for the month ended January 31, 2025. My apologies, I got the wrong date on there. A year behind.
Turned on.
No.
There you go.
There it goes. So the first report I'm presenting is for the Hermiston URA. Property taxes have been received through the end of January at 116% of what was levied, which is a good thing. The North URA construction project is on schedule, and crossing design for the Hermiston drain is underway. It's not cooperating with me. We're 7 months into the budget year, or about 58.3% of budget to actual. Monthly revenues are under projection by about 445,000 when compared to the projections. But when compared to budget, revenues are meeting expectation at 65.4%. And I went through and annualized the property taxes because we receive all that lump, most of it in November and December. So if you were to not do that, it would be about 80% of budget, and you wouldn't get that nice flat curve like we're supposed to. We have received 100% of budgeted property taxes. This is consistent, a little bit better than the past 3-year average of 96%. This is really not cooperating with me. Monthly expenses under projections by 828,000. 5 departments are over budget when compared to projected. City Council, Transportation, Parks, Court, and Public Safety Center. City Council is 2.9% over budget when compared to actuals, and that's for that annual training, and I do anticipate that that'll smooth out by the end of the fiscal year, so I'm not panicked about that. Parks are 3.7% over budget due to seasonal activity and this equipment repair. We did add some supplemental to that department, so we're gonna be okay. This was not reflected in this because that hasn't been, the supplemental was not added to the January statements as it was not approved yet. So you'll see that reflected in February. I do have EOTech, the EOTech barn projects. We went over about 110,000, and this was due to, there was supposed to be a match for the project, which will be taken care of before the end of the fiscal year end. And the reason we're able to cover that, some of the sources are from earnings from the bond proceeds interest that we've invested in the LGIP pool account and savings on other related projects from these resources. So as of the end of January, we had earned $560,000 approximately in interest earnings from those bond funds that we had available from the ones that were issued last May. And so that's about a 4% return. And so we're watching that. And utility funds are about 1.3 million over projected revenues. As you can see, those are the reasons listed below there for that. And that's still about 3.8% over expectation. And this is occurring due to the reasons noted above. HES fund is 131,000 over projected expenditures, but when compared to budget, meeting expectation at about 49%. So we're actually right on the button there. Regional water fund is 54,000 under projected revenue, but when compared to current revenues, we're exceeding expenses by about $35,000. And so that's not dipping into that cash forward that we have that we're saving for ongoing construction in that fund. And that's my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions after their presentation.
Just a couple updates on some of the capital projects. Gear and Harper Road realignment. Very happy. I just got an update from the engineers this morning that we've finally gotten some word back from Union Pacific, and they gave us some minor changes, and they want us to make some more changes. So at least we're making some progress. At least we know that they got our stuff, so that's good. But so that's moving along. At least the comments that they sent back, they're not wholesale realignments or any changes like that. They're pretty minor comments. So that is a good thing. I think we're still on track to be into construction on that in calendar year 2026. So once we get the approval from Union Pacific, then we would actually go into design of the intersection. So that'll take a number of months. So
Copy, the railroad is on track.
the railroad
Gotcha.
is on track. Yep. Yep. I could come up with more, but yeah, I'll leave it at that. So
Please don't.
let's see. So the north first sidewalk on the eastern portion of the roadway. Again, we continue to move in property acquisition for that one. So no major updates there. Would you guys like to hear more about aquifer storage and recovery? I could go into it. Okay. And then our well number 6 chlorination structure, we are out to bid this week, or out to advertisement on this week. So you'll be seeing a contract coming before you in the next month or two for improving the structure up at well 6. And then well 4 controls, that's the one in our capital improvement plan. It looks like it's from like the 1950s space, stage. So that project is getting kicked off on design right now as well. And then our Gladys and Main project, that's fully complete at this point, just a couple of minor punch list items. And then final thing on my side, our hangar project up at the airport, we got our building permits. The city finally issued those. So our hangars moving forward, starting on the foundation here next week, and we should see some vertical construction here in the next few months.
So then on the library, they're continuing to work on the framing. And in the basement, they have re-poured most of the concrete that they need to. They had to build some footings, and they had to reroute a little bit of the under slab plumbing. So they've been able to put that back. And we have planned a tour for the council at one of our April meetings. So we'll have a chance to walk through and see the progress of the construction. The ARC building, we're waiting for weather to agree with kind of painting and finishing up the outside. Everything else is completed. On the Public Safety Center, all the demolition has been completed on the inside. Again, the snow we had last week kind of interfered with some concrete pours that they were going to do there, but they should be moving forward with pouring the footings on a new Sallyport area, and then they'll be starting to move forward with all the rest of the foundation and things that need to be done as they build that. There's just one small area that's being added in the back for a Sallyport, and on the top will be a training room. So that's moving forward. Go to the next. All right. Eotech Barns, the slide was supposed to come out. So we're done with this slide. To answer any questions.
Councilor Brown?
I got like two, but the first one's for Mr. Palacios, and it was on the first slide. I just wanted, had a quick question on it. When I see it again, maybe it's going to be answered, but you mentioned, I think 116%. That's over projection, or I guess, can you just explain that number a little bit to me? That's more than we anticipated?
Yeah, it's over budget. Yeah, 16% over budget. And that's because of the way the URA works when you levy those taxes. Because we asked for 100% of the assessed value based in that district.
Okay, no, and thank you, because I mean, when I see this, I might assume I know what it means, but I like hearing from you a little bit more of the concrete facts on that. I do have a question on the LGIP. You mentioned it earlier. When our previous financial manager was here, I think we had I guess for our savings, we had percentages allocated to certain groups like bonds, LGIP. So I guess I haven't seen that in a while. So I guess I'm curious to see, and it doesn't have to be today, but to kind of review or re-see that again in our investment pool and see kind of where we're at with that.
That'd be fine. Do we want to do that like in a work session?
Well, we've done that investment report quarterly, so we'll be back to doing that later this year.
I wasn't aware of that, and I apologize.
No, you're fine. Thank you. Thank you for that. And last one, Mr. Morgan, you mentioned about the sidewalks, and I know it's on the east side. It's on next to the railroad, right? Is that going to be still kind of like a winding path? Is it just going to be a walkway? Because I think when we had the rendering, it looked absolutely beautiful. And I know it wasn't kind of completed when North First Place was completed because of other things. But is this still going to be kind of like a curvy walkway? Is it just going to be a straight path?
Yes, so it's what you'd consider to be a curb-tight sidewalk. So right now you see the curb and gutter that's constructed there. So this would just be a sidewalk tied up against the curb. Unfortunately, the right-of-way meanders through there also. So that's what ultimately pinched down some of the sections through there. And so in order to be able to fit the pathway through there, we have to just keep it tied up against the back of the curb.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any
That's
other
it.
questions? Seeing none. Mr. Harden, you got any questions? Okay, sure. All right,
That was your chance.
yeah. Council comments? Seeing none. Can I get a motion to accept the January financial report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Hayward, all right. It's
Yeah.
been motioned by Counselor McCarthy, seconded by Counselor Hayward. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. It still takes a little bit of work not to say yes on some of these things.
I saw your mouth almost.
I did. I was all ready to go.
If he says it, does it just not count? Yeah. So
Just,
knock yourself out.
just doesn't count.
Just
No.
head down, mute your mic.
Yeah, no thanks. Okay. Council, committees and liaisons. Do we have any city committee and liaison reports? Council Brown.
I attended the Hispanic Advisory Committee. They had the workshop on Sunday on immigration and putting that out there. I was able to attend, and it was a great session. I would say a very informative and empowering session on just knowing your rights as a constitutional, like, person that lives here in the U.S. And so it was great to hear from, very factual, and I would say, would calm a lot of, maybe the nerves or the tensions that maybe some community members might be feeling out there. And so I thought it was a really good presentation, very informative, and was grateful that the Hispanic Advisory Committee was able to put it on.
Okay. Any other committee liaison reports? Seeing none. All right. Mayor's report. Well, I've been sick. And it sucks. I did attend the Congressman Bence's town hall. We'll call it that. The other day, it was quite contentious, to say the least. It was full. There was still empty chairs, but there was Counselor, were you there as well?
No, I just.
Counselor Linton and I were there. We actually had a pre-meeting with the congressman as after or prior to the event, and had the opportunity to talk about some of our wants and needs and such. And so it was a nice time to get to meet the congressman. The town hall itself was. There was some very, very angry people, and there were some people that, there was one young lady who was a displaced worker from the Forest Service who was very, very eloquent in her speech. And I was quite impressed with her speech. So it was towards the end, and I wish she was here for me to tell her that I thought she did a really good job. So aside from that, I don't have anything else to add. So, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, as a daddy with a daughter, want to remind everyone that we've got the Daddy-Daughter Dance through Parks and Rec, the Enchanted Daddy-Daughter Dance, March 22nd at the Community Center. Tickets sold in person, $30 a ticket, and it is March 22nd, 6 to 9.
March 22nd, 6 to 9. Sounds like a fantastic deal.
Yeah, my daughter's been asking when the next one is, so I'm glad that it's coming back. I also want to take a moment, since a few of you have already asked. I had my follow-up with my orthopedic surgeon, and my bones are completely healed. At this point, it's more just getting some random strength back for functions I don't need to do every day. But other than that, I'm basically back to normal. So there we go. That's all I have.
As normal as
A person who can't
As
stand on one foot very
copy.
well can be, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, I don't know whether we'll need to do a council motion to keep you off of ladders in the future, but we might want to look at that.
I'm still trying to convince the fire department to let me get on a truck, so.
I think I might go
They'd have to sign
we might want to call for a motion
an
on that as
EKG,
a hard no. Put that on the record. Okay, council reports. Anyone have anything they wish to share? Councilor Kelso.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an item I'd like to bring forward for consideration to the addition of to an agenda of a future council meeting. About a month ago, we were in receipt of a letter from a concerned community member who was concerned about the placement of an adult-oriented business in town. And I did a little research, and it turns out that of the 10 cities that are closest in population to Hermiston in Oregon, 7 of those do have regulations on the books for adult-oriented businesses. So that's something I'd like for our city to consider to do as well. As I understand it, currently we have no regulation over the placement or the location of those sorts of businesses in our town. So I would like to put that up for consideration. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, been seconded by Councilor Roberts.
Can I ask for clarification?
Please.
I just want to make sure I understand that the motion that's being made is for the council to have a discussion about possible regulations to add concerning adult business.
Yes, that's correct, whether via zoning or through our new business license.
Okay, so there has been a motion to add that to the agenda, to a future agenda, and a second. Roll call.
Yes.
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 City Manager Smith, it appears that ball's in your court now. Speaking of the ball, any other council comments?
I have council, but that's just a regular council comment. I was just going to talk about the Harkin Rider Center, and I know a couple of the fellow council was there, and so it was great for it to finally open up, see the progress and everything that's been made outside. I think it's going to be a great space for the community. I'm sure it's going to be a great space for weddings because it looks like a great, great location. So, yeah. So I'm excited for it.
Well, that sounded quite pointed.
Yeah.
Yes, I too was with y'all for that. We did the ribbon cutting and it was a nice event. Most of us were in attendance, actually, I believe. And so it is a very, very nice space, well laid out. Excellent work on getting it set up. Nice job, sir. Well done. And it looks like it's going to be a lot of good use come out of that. So, okay. Any others? Last chance. Okay, City Manager Smith. You have nothing. Well, in that case, we are going to go to, where's page? There it is. We don't have any youth advisors, so we're going to adjourn the city council meeting and convene the Urban Renewal Agency ×2. Call the meeting to order. New business, facade grant for the Hermiston Masonic Lodge number 138 for tax lot, or 1N2810 DATL tax lot, 10400 through 200 West Orchard Avenue. Good Lord.
Mr. Spencer, please.
Yeah, we do have another facade grant for our downtown urban renewal area. The Masonic Lodge is working on improving their signage and exterior lighting. They've requested a facade grant to improve that. Their total budget for the project is $8,600. The Planning Commission met on February 12th of this month to review the application, and after scoring it recommends a 40% match, which would be about $4,000.
Can we afford it?
Yes.
Okay. Question.
How much money do we have in the facade grant right now?
Right now, we haven't expended any this year, so we have the full 60,000.
So
We have allocated 30,000 for Club 24, and then this one would be the second one.
So if I'm doing the math correctly, if we did the full 50%, it would be like an extra $860. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm thinking about the value that the city is getting over their municipal lot with the additional lighting. That's a benefit to our citizens that they're providing not only the installation, but the ongoing electricity to light up our area. Personally, I think that the score might have been a little bit low. I respect the commission, getting to the 40%, but I would be an advocate to give them the full 50 if that's something everybody would be amenable to.
Councilor Kelso?
I would agree with that. I think the signage does need some help, but I think the real benefit to the city there is the additional lighting in that west parking lot, and I think it's sorely needed. So I would agree with Councilor Roberts that we should fund the 50%.
Mr. Harden, you got anything you want to throw in there? Okay. All right, so can I get a motion that is amended?
Mr.
Council, oh, never mind, sorry.
I just had a comment, I guess, to that end to what the council was saying. I did look at, in our packet, we do have the applications that each commission member reviewed. And most of them, for the most part, were pretty high, hit that 50% mark. I think there was like a skew of maybe one or two that kind of made it go that way. So I'd go with the majority of what the commission says, and I'd go with the recommendation that Mr. Roberts has put out.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so your motion is,
I would move to approve a 50% match award for the exterior improvements and signage to 200 West Orchard Avenue.
Second.
Second.
okay, been motioned to change to 50% match by Counselor Roberts and seconded by Counselor Kelso. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. I'm gonna get it in there somehow. All right. Okay, that passes by everybody unanimously. 7-0. Any other, Urban Renewal Agency business? We are adjourned. And